Alright, radius fretboards are a bad idea, and I wish guitar companies would stop making them like that, or I wish at least a few companies would make a completely flat fingerboard for guitar. I think there is one. I think Vigier, a French company, makes with the Sean Lane model, has a flat fingerboard, but that's the only one I know is as far as a popular guitar company. But I'll show you the obvious reason. So here's a bending on the first string. That's good. And there goes the note. And this is a great guitar, by the way. It's just I wish it didn't have a 10-inch radius on the fretboard. So you have to compensate for it. You have to have your action higher on the outside strings as well, especially the first, second string. And then typically what people do is they'll have it so the saddles don't match the radius of the fretboard. And to me that makes things a little more unpredictable. And the tone on each string is a little different when you do that as well, depending on how much force you put into it. This one I have set up to where it pretty much follows the curve of the fretboard, so I can do good, decent bend on the second string. Third, the tone is close, string to string. But what a lot of people do is raise it up on the first and second string. So that's going to increase the difficulty of playability, change the tone on these strings. So you'll be able to hit the two thinner strings a little harder and get a fuller sound that way. And then when you get to the fourth and the third string, they'll be really close to the fretboard and they'll rattle a little bit more. So inconsistent tones, another disadvantage if you set it up the typical way. And it's not just bends that are more difficult. It's more difficult for the right hand because the strings are in a different place. That's if you match the radius of the fretboard. So cross picking is going to be more difficult. Finger picking is going to be more difficult. They got things right on classical guitars, and they messed up the design when they switched over to steel strings. Of course, this is just my opinion, so some of you might be a little bit offended. And I have the action set up pretty low on this thing, and you can bend until the string breaks. You have to bend a little further on a classical guitar anyway, but if I wanted to cross pick on this thing, it's easier too. I try not to use a pick on this guitar. I don't want it to end up looking like Willie Nelson's. But, slide playing is more difficult. You can get radiused slides, but I don't see very many of them. And so then what do? You compensate, and then you compensate at the saddles or at your bridge. And then the radius on your bridge doesn't match the fretboard. And what's the point of doing that? I mean, it just radiusing a fretboard does not make any sense to me unless you are using a violin bow on the thing. But and again, I think every company most of the steel string acoustics radius the fretboard. The argument I've heard over the years, and I have talked to a lot of guitar players about this issue, and I know I'm in the minority with my opinion. They say it's more comfortable and it's easier to play bar chords on, but I don't understand that either. So when I do a bar chord, or they say you curve your finger naturally curves to the fretboard, mine doesn't. So I usually play bar chords on the edge of my finger. And the finger actually curves that way, which is the opposite way most fretboards go. So to me, you have to put more energy into making a bar chord when it is radiused. I typically make a C shape and do that. But if you do the conventional way, or the way a lot of classical guitar players play, hold your finger completely flat and make the bar chord like that, it's still curving. If it's not completely flat, it's curving the opposite way the fretboard does, so making it more difficult to do a bar chord. I mean, you can curve it that way if you're playing with this part of your finger, so you can compensate for it. But I don't see the argument there. And I think what it is people just get used to playing a certain type of guitar, and when it feels different for a while, that'll make them think it's more difficult to play. People have the same opinion about jumbo frets being more difficult to play, which they're not. They're easier. You don't need to put as much energy onto the fretboard with a jumbo fret as you do with a small fret, because you're not running into the wood with a larger fret. But that's another topic. Let's see if any other points. Yeah, the tonal difference between string to string. Of course, the strings are going to sound different anyway, just because the thickness and whether they're wound or not, that'll change the tone. Let me see. Oh yeah, the other argument I have heard is it sounds better with a curved radius, and that doesn't make sense at all. So to me, the only point I could see is it forces you to have your action higher, and that can give you a better tone, more sustain. But you can compensate for that by playing something more softly if you like your action really low. And I have it set up pretty low on this guitar. It'll sound nice and full when you play soft. If you hit it hard, especially right up by the fretboard, you'll get a thin sound. To me, that would be the only reason why a curved or something like a 7.5-inch radius fretboard would sound better, is because it forces you to have your action higher and make it more difficult to play. And I think I talked about the unpredictability of the right hand too. Yeah, I did. So not just the left hand, it's harder for the right hand too. And if any of you guitar makers are out there watching this, could you make me a guitar with a flat fingerboard? Oh, another thing, it makes the repairs more difficult. You have to get more equipment. So I mean, you don't absolutely have to, but I do my own fret leveling and on other people's guitars too, and then I have to buy a bunch of radius sanding blocks. You can just take a beam to it and follow the fretboard, and that's probably going to be fine that way. But when I learned how to level the frets, I went with just radius sanding blocks, and then I have to buy, I don't know how many of them I had to buy, when I could have just got one or just went with a beam if it was a flat fingerboard. So leveling the frets on this classical was really easy. It was a cheap one, so the frets weren't level when I got the guitar. I think that's about all I can think of for now. But hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you're not too offended. But, I'll see you.